event. In case you don't know me, my name's Kelly, I'm the administrator. And firstly, just thank you so much for the completely overwhelming response that we've had to this, so much so that we had to get a bigger room. So just a couple of bits of housekeeping. Firstly, we're going to be filming the event. There's Jackie over there. But she's filming it from the front, so none of your faces should be on show. If anyone does ask a question and they don't want their voice to be on the recording, then just come and have a chat to us afterwards and we'll make sure that you're erased from history. Secondly, we do encourage you to live tweet throughout the event, so you're allowed to have your phones out. The hashtag is LSBU OT Society. So without further ado, I shall introduce Alison Cameron, who is amazing and wonderful and will tell you brilliant things.
Okay, thanks.
Thanks for that.
Thank you for that lengthy and detailed introduction. That's magic. And that I'm a real tweeter. I'm pretty outrageous on Twitter and everywhere else. Ali C375. I was rather drunk when I discovered Twitter a few years ago, and I didn't know what it was. I wanted to rant to the Prime Minister or something, because that's how I would go. And they said there's this new thing called Twitter, and I must have, in the middle of, into my second bottle of vodka, chosen that, and I've ended up having to keep it, sort of thing. Well, I've kept it anyway. 375, you don't need to know this. This will probably be the only thing you'll remember from this. 375 is the telephone code for Minsk. Like, you need to know that. Right, as you can see, I don't keep to the script. I did write a script because Kelly's such a perfectionist. She wanted to know. I thought I better just do this properly. So I tried to print out what I was going to say, and I looked at it. You can see all the OT I've had has been really useful. I didn't notice that the printer was no ink, so I've absolutely no real idea what I'm going to say. First of all, this is really important for me because I had a relapse recently in my mental health and I ended up in hospital. So I'm just quite recently out of hospital, and it was, as admissions go, it was a really good one. The staff were amazing, and I really needed it, but it really affected my confidence to be back in hospital again. And it affected my faith in, I do a lot of this kind of public speaking and everything else, but it feels like I've gone right back to the beginning again. So when Kelly got in touch with me and said, do you know anyone who would come and speak? I thought, well, here's an opportunity, and isn't it great that it would be to OTs and future OTs, because I've met some great OTs along the way. I'll show you some really bad examples of the old school as well. I've even brought some props with me from my past that nobody else has seen. Just a very, do tweet about this. I don't know how you'll describe it. I'm just kind of bigging it up. It's quite shocking. I've had to carry it with me, and it's like dead embarrassing. But anyway, it's about the old days of OT. Right, I'm going to waffle on, so I'll try not to. I called my talk Occupied. I was trying to be kind of clever. I'm a long-term user of mental health and social care and substance misuse and homelessness services. I must have liked men in uniform or something, because I was always ended up being hauled in by some kind of uniformed service, a paramedic or a terrorist police or something, whatever. And recently I get arrested. But it's good because I remember it, because I'm in recovery these days. So I'm to be found chained to railings and all of that kind of stuff, because I'm having a kind of middle-aged, midlife crisis. But these days, I think I would describe myself as an activist. And that's interesting because a lot of my admissions to hospital and so on rendered me completely passive. And I'm known for speaking truth to power even when my voice shakes. So now I think I might as well get on with it. Oh, by the way, I hope you can hear me. There's no microphone. I'm told I'm quite loud. I am an introvert, so this is all kind of my dark side. There's going to be very little actual death by PowerPoint and theory, because look at the time of the day, it's ridiculous. You can look up stuff yourself. But this is about power. It's about power shift. The shift in power and in terms of citizens' level of engagement has been shown as a ladder, since time immemorial. If you want to look it up, Arnstein's ladder of engagement. This is an adaptation of that I like, because it's got the kind of buzzwords that you hear about these days, co-design and co-production at the top, but I get it around doing to, doing for, and doing with. I noted in my experience, I went through those stages in terms of my own interaction with my own care team. You know, I had a whole entourage of people that still have. So there was that power shift, going from passive to just being given and then taking some power in respect of decisions about my own health. But also the same stages after I decided to use my experiences in the health and social care system. I now work as a consultant. I started 2 years ago after a short career break due to ill health and chaos and insanity and marbles rattling down the pavement. 17 years. I hadn't worked for 17 years, and I started working within health and social care independently, because I don't like being told what to do, and I believe in when I see the emperor has no clothes on, I believe in saying so, and that doesn't go down too well with some of the organisations I work with, so without going into details about that. Oops, wrong thingy, wrong gizmo, right. I thought I knew who I was. I was defined by my job. I had a bloomin' stupid job title, actually. I sounded like a cheap Eastern European airline. I was a PDO International, in brackets, International, which is Principal Development Officer International. I ran international development projects. I'm a graduate in Russian. I graduated like 100 million years ago in the kind of Middle Ages. It's kind of etched in granite, my degree, my first degree. Or papyrus, it's that old, it feels like that. It was still the Soviet Union when I studied, so I was sent to what was then Leningrad, and that's where I got arrested for the first time on my 21st birthday. Got arrested for hooliganism. I won't go into details. I'll probably tell Kelly at some point what I actually did to get arrested. It's not very pretty, but you've got your lecturer here, so I can tone it down. So I know what it's like. You know when people ask who you are and you respond with your job title? That was me, and I really, I realised, well, what did I think I was going to be saying at this stage? Oh yes. I still don't know how to define myself. This is a name badge. I'm a fellow of this meaningless acronym here. National Institute for Health Research, Collaborative for Leadership and Applied Health Research and Care, brackets, Northwest London. Yeah, I'm a fellow of that thing. And I hate being called a patient representative. It's sort of twin set and pearls and in my head, or service user. I hate that, and I don't claim to represent anyone, because I don't. So one of my colleagues, who's actually involved with South Bank University, she got to it before she knew I'd hate that, so she scored it out, and that's how she saw me. So I wore it throughout the evening. It was absolutely brilliant. I ran projects around Chernobyl, the countries affected by fallout from the Chernobyl nuclear disaster. Does anyone know what year that was in? 86. In Ukraine. I was still a student at that time when it happened. I got evacuated out of Leningrad, and I was annoyed about that. We had to hand our clothes in, and we got these horrible, like, sweatshirt things for British Airways to wear. It's one thing I do remember. I've got a resentment against them for that. But I started working in those countries, particularly Belarus, which is next door to Ukraine, and took most of the fallout. About 70% of it came down in Belarus. But the reason I mentioned this work is that it was about us, where I was in an oil-rich, very wealthy city in Scotland, Aberdeen, loads and loads of money, had a budget 28 million, and we were making decisions on what was best for the victims of Chernobyl, because we had the power, we had the money. We weren't asking them at all what they wanted, what was their solution to their problems, and that resonates with the experience I had in healthcare. The way they were portrayed was this kind of thing, victims, and to try and tug at the heartstrings. But actually, when I went to those communities, I saw people starting to form together into self-help organizations for the first time. There had been none of that allowed during the Soviet days because everything was state-controlled. With that having changed in the 1990s, people were starting to find their own answers and probably needed some expertise, some kind of experience, but we weren't doing that. We were sending in expensive equipment, which was probably going to need repaired, and just, you know, and we felt dead good about it. We felt, oh, yeah, no, we're helping these poor people. And I didn't see victims, I saw survivors, which is quite different. This is an example of the Ukrainian. I've got loads of photographs of people from those countries showing that they're anything but passive. This is during the Maidan, either revolution or fascist putsch, wherever, depending on which side you're on. But she's playing the piano at the Ukrainian barricades on Maidan a couple of years ago. As I say, anything but victims. I became a sort of, I see the exclusion zone. I've been in the actual exclusion zone. I've dug up soil to bring back to get tested and that stuff. But I sort of ended up in an exclusion zone kind of metaphorically as well. When I became ill, my colleagues were killed working on one of my environmental projects. And it wasn't so much the having to go over to Belarus and arrange to have bodies repatriated and all of that. It wasn't so much the horrific stuff that I saw, it was the fact that politicians were involved that day, and I was strongly advised to lie about what happened. And I find that very contrary to my own values as a person, and I found that I found it impossible to handle dealing with bereaved relatives, knowing what I knew and having to present this to lie, basically. That's what made me ill. I was so devoted to my work because there really wasn't anything in my life apart from work, because I was that dedicated, passionate about it. I just kept on going. I kept on going way longer than I should have done in a very bullying culture. Lots of political interference, lots of restructuring, not the NHS. It just sounds like a lot of the NHS, allegedly. I wouldn't know anything about that. Actually, I have to say that my relapse was brought about by workplace bullying, which has kind of triggered a lot of this stuff is still very current for me, even though it's a long time ago. There's that when I've worked with whistleblowers, I did some work with someone called Jeremy Hunt. Yes, well, moving swiftly on. I work with people who are labelled whistleblower, and they're all people I really identify with, who had the values that just could not stay quiet about stuff, and that was the same as me, and it still is. I'm wired that way. And Jeremy Hunt, it wasn't of any interest to him what I thought anyway, so that was fine. It's the first time I've ever been ignored on a completely equal opportunities basis. Jeremy Hunt didn't care what any of the expert advisory group said to him, whether we were a professor or just me. No interest. So that was progress, I thought. After becoming ill, in the end, I had a complete. I know there is no official such thing as a breakdown, but everything broke down. Because so much of my identity was wrapped up in my work, and without that, I felt like there was no me. It was that bad. So, after kind of basically started self-medicating the symptoms of post-traumatic stress disorder with alcohol, and there was a lot of alcohol around in the international relations world. I could dress it up as international friendship and understanding. The people from Belarus always used to come by bus, and they just loaded the bus full of industrial kind of vodka, and no actual suitcases or anything, and just drive all the way to Scotland like that. And I just thought, yeah, but it took its toll, and I ended up homeless here in London, in the posh areas. I only dossed in posh bits of London, so Kensington and Holland Park. So I had to, standard. I slept in a car park in Kensington Town Hall, I have apologised to the mayor for peeing against his Bentley. I did do that. I'm sure he was touched. So my CV, it's roughly this. It's sort of like, I should have added, there's another stay in a psychiatric unit. It's probably more of a, that's what I remember, but you know, it's all kind of a bit foggy. It was just this kind of revolving door. I felt that I certainly didn't need my brain. I ended up quite passive. I used to like being admitted to this private psychiatric hospital where the NHS had a contract, because there were kind of rock stars and Saudi princes and that in there. And there was nice food, and I didn't have to think for myself. It was just, you know, long admissions. This is still quite a long time ago. Just not feeling connected to myself. And quite bleak, this picture from the Soviet era. Milos Forman version of One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest. There's just something about that's very kind of rigid and boxed, and that's how that period of my life felt. Or like this, you know, I was in this kind of passive state where I couldn't really make decisions at all, and yet the system was so fragmented because I had no housing, social care and mental health weren't really connected. Substance misuse and mental health weren't connected. I was too mad for the substance misuse people, and I was too drunk for the mental health people. So I just kind of spiraled down and down, being admitted to an A&E, you know, having a fit in the street or something, ending up back again, being medically declared fit and turfed out, and really bad stuff, like being in a kind of traumatic amnesia. And being found, and I'd been stabbed, and I have no recollection. I've got permanent scarring on my stomach. I have no recollection of that. There was no alcohol or substances found in me. I was just, whatever happened, it was too traumatic for my brain even to register it. So I'm really lucky to be alive. That somebody found me that day and got me to hospital. It was a hard time. It varies now to the extent to which I connect to it when I'm speaking, but because I'm just out of hospital and it's very raw, I'm really feeling it at the moment talking to you. So there was a feeling that anything that was positive about myself, you know, that stuff about, I worked with Nelson Mandela, you know, I can name drop, I'm really good at this. And, you know, all of that was like it was cryogenically suspended somewhere else. It was kind of that picture. I always use that picture. Probably get sued by whoever's actual picture it is, but that freezing of assets, and that's not my illness. That was being in the system. I wanted to find basket weaving. Now here's my pièce de résistance. I've had really great OTs as care coordinators and stuff. I've also had the old school. I was sent to a rehab in Plymouth, and there was somebody, she's absolutely lovely, she was an occupational therapist of the old school, and I was made to go to OT group, and I've brought with me tonight what they made me make. It still smells. I hope it's not illegal substances. Yeah, that I stabbed the rags into this thing with sheer hatred. That with a crochet hook. And I'd say, what is this, Jane Austen? The men's rehab, they're doing clay pigeon shooting and carpentry. What's this about? And do you want to knit a teddy? Not the day hell freezer. I was such a challenge to this poor woman. Well, that's fine, we'll do, and she made me do scratch a picture on this gold foil of like a plant of some kind. And then it was begrudgingly paint by numbers. It was tropical fish, and I don't know what, I bloody hate that thing. I can still see it now, Jesus. And that's only a few years ago, and you know, she's a friend, and she'd be horrified if she knew I was doing this. So there was just something about occupational therapy, because I assumed my active life was over, right? So that was my assumption, I wrote myself off. So in that way, I just thought, well, you know, I might as well do this, because instead of this, it'll be the Jeremy Kyle show at best. But actually I'd started to notice stuff. I'd started to sort of learn things as I went along. I loved this. It's just like useless nonsense. Oh yeah, and this is how it felt. I note now this kind of theme in recovery. If anyone's, I know there's someone that's working West London Mental Health Trust. Don't make people do the adult colouring in thing. It's no good. It's about unless they really want to. That's not what recovery is in my book. Recovery needs to be about social justice and about all these other issues like housing and benefits, and it's not about fluffiness and colouring stuff in. So I want to get the mindless violence colouring book because that's how I feel about a lot of recovery. If you want to hear about a different take, look up the unrecovery star and compare it. The recovery star and the unrecovery star. And Muggins here was part of the movement that created the unrecovery star. This is my actual artwork that I did in a hospital, in that posh hospital, because they had an art therapy department. One session of art therapy, I disappeared into my room, kind of zonked on tranquilizers. God, it was great in there. Mind a week in there now, you know. And I produced this. And so, you know, there were abilities still there. There was some skills still there. I've never studied art or anything. I don't know, you know, that's what I did. And it was put in an exhibition with, all sorts of lovies and stuff because it was a posh hospital. I needed something, onto the actual subject of the talk. It's not really meant to be about me and everything. I did a lot of service user involvement. You know, after I started to reconnect with that, see with the art stuff, it kind of started to open up something, and this is me going up that ladder that I showed you. Things were starting to change in the way that I interacted with professionals. I must have been hellish to work with because I was so resistant. I had one occupational therapist who said, I feel like I'm at a job interview whenever I'm with you. And it's because I was terrified. And when I'm terrified, it manifests itself in this horrible kind of Margaret Thatcher on acid type, you know, it goes into intellect, and I'll start going, well, I'll just write a stiff letter to the Board of Trustees. In rehab, they were all out of Holloway prison except me. And they were all going, I'm not effing having it, I'm not effing this. And whereas I was going, well, I'm most dismayed that my borough's paying for it. And I realised we were all just scared, all of us. And I was exactly the same as those women in there. Same stuff. A lot of the service user involvement stuff was tokenistic. It was because I can put a suit on, I've been to university, I'm white, I'm the type that tends to get asked to do stuff, be on committees and all of that. I did all of that. I could be the poster child for that stuff. And I'd sit there, you know, and very rarely ended up in any actual change. I can spot a fake consultation a mile off. I know when the decisions have been made, but, you know, before I've arrived. Because I used to do that stuff. I'm such a control freak. I was a control freak in my work. So I know when I'm on the receiving end of it. When services have to involve us, blah, 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 blah. And I thought there's definitely something missing. I was at that stage as well, just, you know, getting up that ladder with my own recovery with a small r, if you like, where I was finally housed. I was starting to do stuff, starting to go to meetings for work and represent. I was a governor of a mental health trust, and I was bloody terrible because I was always leaking to the press and everything, as I had my kind of inability to deal with injustice, and so I was angry, you know, the angry service user, the angry patient. It was tough. Would have been tough to be on the receiving end of me. So while in that rehab, while I was doing things like making this thing, it really smells. It's got lavender in it. It's disgusting. That's pretty good going though, because it's like 5 years old now. While in that rehab, I read this book called No More Throwaway People by Professor Edgar Kahn. And